My mom never once raised her voice at me in 32 years, and that was exactly the problem. You could walk into our house in Millbrook any evening, and it would feel like stepping into one of those perfect family commercials you see on TV late at night, the kind where everything is warm and orderly and nothing ever feels out of place. The soft golden lighting from the living room lamps would spill across the hardwood floors, catching on the framed photos lined up perfectly on the mantel, each one showing us smiling in exactly the right way, teeth showing just enough, eyes crinkled in that practiced happiness. The warm smell of pot roast or chicken and rosemary would drift out from the kitchen, mixing with the faint scent of the lemon polish Mom used on the furniture every Saturday morning without fail, that clean citrus smell that always made the whole house feel like it had been wiped clean of any real mess. The clink of silverware being set on the table just so, the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the background, everyone smiling like the world was exactly as it should be, calm and peaceful and safe. And then I'd share something, maybe a good grade from school when I was little, or later a new job opportunity that made my heart race with excitement, or even a dream that felt so big in my chest it almost hurt to say it out loud, and Mom would let out this tiny sigh. Not loud, not angry, just disappointed, like the air itself had grown tired of me trying to take up any extra space at all. And I would spend the rest of the night trying to fold myself smaller, quieter, less noticeable, so I wouldn't disappoint her again. That sigh became the soundtrack of my childhood, my teenage years, my whole adult life up until recently. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't something you could point to in a fight or a headline, or even explain to a friend without sounding like you were making a big deal out of nothing. It was just there, soft and constant, wearing me down like water on stone, until one day I looked up and realized I had almost disappeared completely. I can still hear it now if I let myself go quiet for too long. That small exhale that said everything without saying a word, the kind of sound that lingers in your bones long after it's gone, the kind that makes you question every good thing you ever felt proud of. I'm not someone who likes drama, never have been. I just wanted to be enough. That's it. That's all this was ever about. I remember being 7 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with crayons scattered everywhere across the scratched wooden surface, working on a drawing for hours after school. It was supposed to be our family, me with my pigtails and my favorite red sweater, Mom in her favorite blue apron, Dad with his newspaper folded just right, even the dog we had back then named Max with his floppy ears and his tail wagging in the picture. I colored the sky a bright blue and gave everyone big smiles because that's what I thought families were supposed to look like, all happy and together and perfect. I ran into the kitchen to show Mom, heart pounding with pride, the paper crinkling in my small hands. She was chopping vegetables for dinner, the knife making that steady, rhythmic sound against the cutting board, the smell of onions making my eyes water a little. She wiped her hands on her apron, took the paper from me, held it up to the light from the window, and gave me that gentle half-smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "If that's what you want to hang on the fridge," she said softly, her voice as even as always. Then came the sigh. Just a small exhale, barely audible, over the sound of the faucet running in the background, but it landed right in the middle of my chest, like someone had placed a heavy stone there. I spent the whole afternoon in my room trying to fix it, adding more details, making the colors brighter, making the smiles even bigger, shading the grass perfectly. Because maybe if it was perfect enough, the sigh would go away this time. It never did. That moment stuck with me in ways I didn't understand until years later. The way it made me question every good thing I ever created. The way it taught me early on that my joy needed to be quieter, smaller, less demanding. That same sigh showed up again and again, year after year, like a quiet shadow I could never quite outrun no matter how hard I tried. It was there when I got accepted to college, standing in the living room, holding the thick acceptance letter in my shaking hands. The paper crinkling under my fingers as I read the words out loud to her with my voice full of hope. Mom was folding laundry on the couch, the television murmuring softly in the background with some cooking show she liked to watch while she worked. She looked up from the basket of towels, gave me the half smile, and said, "If that's what you want, Audra." Sigh. It followed me when I landed my first real job at the accounting firm downtown, the one I had interviewed for 3 times. practicing my answers in the car on the way home with my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I came home excited, telling her about the corner desk they promised me in the benefits package and the way the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I pictured myself there every day. She was stirring something on the stove, the steam rising in soft curls that caught the light. "That's nice, honey," she said, followed by the sigh that made my stomach drop like I had missed a step on the stairs. Even when I introduced her to the man I thought I would marry, his name was Evan, and he had this warm laugh that made me feel seen for the first time in my life. She sat across from us at the dinner table, the candles flickering softly between the plates, the wine glasses catching the light. After he left, she gave me that same look across the empty table. "If that's what you want, sigh." Always the same soft sound, always the same message underneath it. You could have done better. You could have been quieter. You could have taken up less space in the world. It happened at holidays, at birthdays, at graduations, at every milestone that should have been celebrated, but instead felt like another quiet test I was failing without even knowing the rules. I would lie in bed at night replaying those moments, the sigh echoing in my head, wondering what I could have done differently to make her eyes light up instead of dim. Emotionally, I was losing the right to feel anything big or loud or proud. I started apologizing for my own excitement before it even left my mouth, the words tumbling out in a rush like I was trying to make it smaller before she could. Socially, I became the girl everyone called so easy to get along with, the one who never caused problems, never raised her voice, never made a scene, while inside I was dying a little more every time that sigh landed, chipping away at something I couldn't even name yet. Financially, I stayed in jobs I hated longer than I should have, turning down better offers because leaving would mean explaining myself to her. And I couldn't stand the thought of another one of those sighs echoing in the kitchen while I packed my things and tried to act like it didn't matter. I was the kid who set the table without being asked every single night, making sure Dad's coffee was exactly the way he liked it. 2 sugars, a splash of milk, never too hot, poured into the same blue mug he'd had since before I was born. I was the one who never argued, who smoothed things over before they even started, who kept the peace like it was my full-time job from the time I could walk. I just wanted the house to stay peaceful, the way everyone outside our front door always said it was when they came over, for holidays or casual visits. I thought that was love. I really did. I believed it with everything in me, even when the weight of it started to feel like it was crushing me slowly from the inside. Even when I started waking up in the middle of the night with this heavy feeling in my chest that I couldn't explain. I remember the exact Tuesday it first hit me how deep this went, how it had shaped every part of who I was becoming without me even realizing it. I was 27 years old, standing in the same kitchen that had seen every version of me from pigtails to power suits. I had just gotten the promotion I'd been working toward for 3-long years at the accounting firm. Senior accountant, with my own office and a real salary bump that meant I could finally breathe a little easier. My heart was still racing from the meeting as I walked through the back door, the screen creaking the way it always did in the humid Millbrook evenings. Mom was stirring gravy in the big cast-iron pot, the wooden spoon scraping softly against the bottom, the smell of rosemary and roasted chicken, filling the air so thick I could almost taste it. I told her, voice full of pride I couldn't hide, even if I tried. She didn't turn around right away. When she did, there was that half smile again, the one I had seen 1,000 times. "If that's what you want, Audra." Then the sigh. It landed like a stone on my chest, heavy and cold and familiar. I stood there holding the edge of the counter, the tile floor cold under my thin socks, the overhead light making her wedding ring glint as she kept stirring, like my news was just another item on her never-ending to-do list. I waited for more, for "I'm so proud of you," or even a quick hug that might have made the moment feel real, but nothing came. The silence stretched out between us until I actually apologized. I said, "Sorry if it's not what you pictured for me." I apologized for succeeding, for being happy, for existing in a way that might disturb the perfect calm she had built around us all these years. That night, I lay in bed replaying every similar moment, the sighs piling up in my mind like snowdrifts I couldn't clear, the weight of 32 years pressing down on me until I could barely breathe. That was the wound. Not one big, screaming fight you see in other families on TV or hear about from friends. not slammed doors or broken dishes or raised voices that everyone could point to later. Just 32 years of those sighs adding up, layer after quiet layer, until I realized I had spent my whole life trying to outrun a sound that never got louder than a whisper. I can still feel everything from that night. The way my throat tightened like there was something stuck there. The way my hands gripped the counter until my knuckles went white. The faint hum of the refrigerator in the background like it was the only thing keeping the silence from swallowing me whole. I went to my room after dinner, the same room I'd had since I was 12, with the same faded blue walls and the same quilt Mom had sewn when I was little. The fabric soft from years of washing, and I cried without making a sound. Because even my tears felt like they would disturb the peace she worked so hard to keep every single day. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, tracing the cracks in the paint with my eyes, wondering how something so small could hurt so much, wondering why I kept coming back to the same place of shrinking myself over and over again. But here's the part I haven't told you yet. Those sighs didn't stay in the kitchen. They followed me into every single relationship I tried to build, every decision I made, every time I wanted to take up any real space in the world. They were there when I started dating Evan, turning small disagreements into reasons for me to apologize before he even finished speaking, my voice getting smaller and smaller until I hated the sound of it. They were there when I thought about switching careers to something that felt more like me, whispering in my ear that maybe I was being selfish for wanting more than the safe path she had always approved of with her quiet nods. They were there in the quiet moments alone in my car after work, sitting in the parking lot with the engine still running, the radio playing low, wondering why I felt so empty even when everything on paper looked fine and everyone outside our family said how lucky I was to have such a calm, loving home. The sighs shaped how I showed up at work, how I interacted with friends, how I even talked to myself in the mirror some mornings when the doubt crept in. I tried to fix it. God, I tried so hard, in so many different ways over the years, each attempt feeling more desperate than the last. First, I started saying, "I'm proud of myself" out loud in front of her, hoping if I modeled it enough, she would join in and the pattern would finally break. I'd come home from a good day at work and say it right there, at the dinner table, while passing the mashed potatoes, my voice steady, but my hands trembling under the table. She would nod politely and say, "That's nice, honey," followed by the sigh that made my stomach twist like I had done something wrong again. I tried it for months, varying the ways I said it, sometimes adding details about my day, but the response was always the same. Second, I brought Tessa over for coffee one Saturday afternoon. Tessa has been my best friend since we were 9 years old, the only person who ever saw the sighs for what they really were and never made me feel crazy for noticing them. We sat at the kitchen table with our mugs steaming, the steam curling between us like a secret, and I asked Mom right there in front of Tessa, "Do you remember when I got that promotion last year?" Mom smiled at Tessa, like I wasn't even in the room. Audra has always been such a hard worker. Then the sigh. Tessa's eyes met mine across the table, and I saw the pity there, soft and sad, and I hated that pity more than the sigh itself. It made me feel even smaller, like I was the one who was broken for caring so much. We talked about it later in the car, Tessa squeezing my hand and telling me I deserved better, but the words felt heavy. We talked about it later in the car, Tessa squeezing my hand and telling me I deserved better, but the words felt heavy, like they were true for someone else but not quite for me yet. Third, I wrote her an 8-page letter one rainy weekend when I couldn't hold it in anymore. The rain tapping against the window like it was trying to get in and washed everything clean. I poured everything out. How the sighs made me feel invisible even when I was standing right in front of her. How I was becoming someone who apologized for breathing, for taking up space, for simply existing in my own life. I described the exact way my chest would tighten every time I heard that soft exhale, how it followed me into meetings at work, into dates, into quiet moments when I should have felt proud. I left it on the kitchen table with a little note that said, "Whenever you have time, Mom." 3 days later, the letter was gone. When I finally asked her about it, she said, "Oh, I read it. Thank you for sharing your feelings." Then the sigh. Like my entire heart was just a mild inconvenience she had politely filed away in some drawer she never opened again. I checked the trash later when she was out, but it wasn't there. It was just gone, like my words had never existed, like the feelings I had carried for 30 years were too messy for her perfect, calm world. My dad, Roy, pulled me aside one evening while Mom was at her book club. The house was quieter than usual, just the ticking of the old wall clock and the faint sound of rain against the windows, the air heavy with the scent of the dinner we had finished earlier. He looked so tired, the way he always did when something real was happening underneath the calm surface we all pretended was normal. "Your mom, she doesn't know how to do this any other way, Audra," he said, his voice low and careful, almost apologetic. Her own mother was the same. Everything had to look perfect from the outside. The sighs were her version of love, I guess. She thinks she's protecting you. He patted my shoulder like that was supposed to fix 30 years of feeling erased. I almost laughed. Almost cried right there in the hallway with the family photos staring down at us, all those frozen smiles, mocking me. Instead, I nodded and said, "I know, Dad. It's fine." That was my weak moment, the moment I chose the Pete's again, because I could already hear the sigh in my head before I even opened my mouth. I shrank back into the role I knew so well, the easy daughter, the one who never made waves, the one who kept everything looking just right no matter what it cost me inside. I went upstairs after that and sat on my bed for a long time, staring at the same faded blue walls, feeling the weight of it all pressing down again. The spiral kept going for years after that, pulling me deeper into patterns I couldn't seem to break, no matter how many times I told myself, this time would be different. My last serious relationship ended because I kept apologizing for having any needs at all. "Sorry, I want to talk about my day when you're tired. Sorry, I cried during that movie. I don't know why it hit me so hard. Sorry, I'm too much sometimes." Evan left because he said he was tired of dating someone who acted like she was a burden just for existing. I couldn't even blame him. I had learned the lesson too well from all those years of sighs. I remember the night he left, standing in the doorway of my apartment, watching his taillights disappear down the street. The rain starting to fall again, and feeling that familiar tightness in my chest, like another sigh had just landed, even though Mom wasn't even there. Tessa tried to drag me to therapy more than once, practically forcing me into the car some days when I was too exhausted to argue. I went twice before I talked myself out of it. The third time, sitting in the waiting room with my hands clasped so tight my nails left marks on my palms. The therapist looked at me across her quiet office, the clock ticking softly on the wall, and called it emotional neglect. I actually laughed out loud in that moment because it sounded so dramatic for people who never yelled, never hit, never did anything you could point to as abuse. But the word stuck with me. It rattled around in my chest every single time Mom sighed after that. It made me see the pattern everywhere. In the way I held my breath before sharing good news, in the way I minimized my accomplishments at family dinners, in the way I smiled through the ache even when no one was watching. I started noticing how I would rehearse conversations in my head, practicing how to say things in the smallest possible way so I wouldn't trigger that sigh. The gathering storm hit on a random Thursday morning when I was 32. I was driving to work, the radio playing low, the morning light filtering through the trees along the road in soft golden streaks. This old song Mom used to hum while she folded laundry came on, one of those slow ballads from the 90s, the kind that always made her voice go soft and distant as she moved through the house. Suddenly, I was crying so hard I had to pull over into a parking lot near the highway, the engine still running, the windshield wipers moving back and forth in the light drizzle. Not because of the song itself, because I finally understood I had spent my entire life waiting for her to see me, really see me, and she never would. Not the way I needed. Not without that sigh attached to it like a shadow I could never shake. I sat there for what felt like hours, the tears blurring the dashboard lights, replaying every sigh from my childhood to now, feeling the loneliness of it all settled deep in my bones. I called Tessa that night from my apartment, the city lights twinkling outside my window like distant stars. I told her everything, the words tumbling out in a rush I couldn't stop, my voice cracking in places I didn't expect. She didn't try to fix it or tell me I was overreacting. She just listened and said, "Audra, you deserve to take up space without apologizing for it every single second." For the first time in my life, I believed her. The quiet decision came 2 weeks later. I didn't yell. I didn't cry in front of Mom or make a big scene. I just decided, deep down where it mattered, that I was done shrinking myself to fit into her version of peace. I wrote it down in a journal that night, the pen moving across the page like a promise to myself, the words feeling heavy but true. I started saying no in small ways at first, each one feeling like a tiny rebellion that built on the last. No to Sunday dinners when I was exhausted from the week and just wanted to sit on my couch in silence with a book and a cup of tea, the steam rising slowly as I let myself breathe. No to the passive questions about when I was going to settle down and give her grandkids. No to the sighs by simply not reacting to them anymore, not apologizing, not explaining, not trying to fix the air between us like I always had. Then I told her I was moving, just 20 minutes away to a small apartment on the other side of Millbrook, but it felt like crossing into another country. I expected the sigh. I got it, soft and familiar as ever. But this time I didn't apologize or rush to smooth it over. I just said, "This is what I want, Mom," and I left the room before she could answer. My hands were shaking as I closed the door behind me, but I felt something new. A tiny spark of space opening up inside my chest for the first time in 32 years. She showed up at my new apartment later that night, unannounced, the porch light casting long shadows across her face. She stood in the doorway, looking smaller than I had ever seen her, her coat still buttoned up tight, like she might need to leave at any second. Her hands were shaking just a little as she held the old family photo from the living room wall, the one where everyone is smiling perfectly in front of the Christmas tree. The one I had stared at 1,000 times, wondering why I felt so invisible in it even though I was right there in the middle. "I didn't know any other way," she whispered, her voice barely above the hum of the refrigerator inside. "My mother sighed the same way at me my whole life. I thought it kept the peace. I thought it protected you from the yelling and the fighting I grew up with." Her voice cracked on the last words. "I'm sorry if it hurt you, Audra." For the first time, I saw her as a person who was also wounded, carrying her own invisible weight from a childhood I had never really asked about. It didn't erase the 32 years. It didn't make the sighs disappear overnight, but it made the whole story feel human in a way it never had before. We sat on the couch and talked for a long time, the words coming slow and careful, like we were both learning a new language together. She told me stories about her own mother that I had never heard, about how the house always had to look perfect, how feelings were kept quiet because loud ones were dangerous. I listened and cried a little, not the loud kind, just quiet tears that felt like release. That same night, after she left, I set my own dinner table with only one plate. No 5 perfect place settings trying to make everything look right. No pretending the house was calm when it wasn't. Just me, a single candle flickering in the warm lamplight, the quiet sound of my own fork against the plate, and no sigh hanging in the air. For the first time, the silence felt like mine. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, letting the moment sink in, feeling the weight lift just a little more. I confronted her on a Sunday afternoon a few weeks later, back in that same kitchen where so many of the wounds had happened. The smell of coffee was strong, the sunlight coming through the window in soft slanted beams across the table. "Mom," I said, my voice steady even though my heart was pounding, "I love you. I really do. But I'm not going to apologize for existing anymore. I'm not going to shrink myself so you can keep peace. Those sighs, they broke something in me for a long time. And I'm done letting them define me." She looked at me. Really looked, without the half smile this time. Then she reached for my hand across the table. Her fingers were cold, the way they always got when she was nervous. "I see you, Audra," she said quietly. "I'm trying to see you." We cried a little then, not the loud kind, just quiet tears that felt like release after years of holding everything in. What felt like the biggest loss, moving out, speaking up, risking her disappointment every single time, turned out to be the gift that gave me back my voice. The thing that hurt the most ended up protecting me from disappearing completely. I picked up that family photo she had brought over weeks earlier. I looked at the perfect smiles, at the little girl version of me sitting there trying so hard to be enough, and for the first time I smiled back at her without feeling guilty or small. I looked at the perfect smiles at old family photo, at the little girl version of me sitting there trying so hard to be enough, and for the first time I smiled back at her without feeling guilty or small. It was like something inside me finally clicked into place, like the last piece of a puzzle I had been carrying around for 32 years without knowing it was missing. Things now aren't perfect. Mom and I still have Sunday dinners sometimes, the table set with the same old plates that have tiny chips on the edges from all the years of careful use. The same soft lighting from the living room lamps casting that familiar warm glow across the walls. The sighs still happen from time to time. Old habits die hard, especially when they've been passed down through generations like some quiet family heirloom. But I don't shrink anymore. I just smile and keep taking up the space I deserve. I learned about myself that I am allowed to be loud in my own quiet way. I am allowed to want more than fine. I am allowed to feel big feelings without apologizing for them every step of the way. I've started new traditions in my apartment, small things that feel like mine for the first time. I light a candle every evening when I get home from work, the flame flickering softly against the walls as I sit down and say one thing I'm proud of out loud. Just for me, sometimes it's something as simple as making it through a tough meeting without shrinking back into old patterns. Sometimes it's remembering to breathe when the old tightness starts to creep in. I've reconnected with old friends I had pulled away from because I was too busy trying to stay small, too scared that my real self would be too much for them, the way it always felt too much for her. I've even taken up painting again, the kind I loved as a kid, with the crayons scattered across the table, and hung my own drawings on the wall without waiting for anyone's approval. Without wondering if the colors were bright enough, or the sunscreen stiff, or if the whole thing would earn me nothing but that soft, disappointed sigh. Remember those 5 perfect place settings Mom always insisted on, even when someone was missing from the table? I set my own table with 1 plate now, and it feels right. It feels like home in a way that house in Millbrook never quite did. The quiet doesn't feel heavy anymore. It doesn't press down on my chest like it used to. It feels like peace I chose for myself, the kind of peace that doesn't require me to disappear to keep it intact. I used to think love had to be silent to be safe. Now I know real love has room for sighs and for voices, for the messy and the loud and the real. It has room for me exactly as I am, with all my feelings and all my dreams and all the space I need to take up. I catch myself sometimes in the middle of the day, standing in my kitchen with the sunlight coming through the window, and I realize I'm not holding my breath anymore. I'm not waiting for the next sigh. I'm just here, fully here. There are days when the old patterns try to sneak back in. Last month, Mom called me on a Tuesday evening, the same kind of Tuesday when that promotion moment had hit me so hard years ago. Her voice was soft on the phone, the way it always is, and she asked about my week in that careful way she has. I told her about a new project at work that I was really excited about, the kind that used to make me rehearse my words 10 times before saying them out loud. I waited for the sigh. It came small and familiar, but this time I didn't apologize. I didn't rush to explain or make it smaller. I just said, "Yeah, Mom, I'm really proud of how it's turning out." And then I let the silence sit there between us for a moment. She didn't say much after that, but something in her voice shifted just a little, like she was trying something she was learning too. We talked for a few more minutes about nothing important: the weather, the neighbor's dog, the recipe she tried last weekend. And when we hung up, I realized my hands weren't shaking. My chest wasn't tight. I had taken up space, and the world hadn't ended. That small victory felt bigger than any promotion ever had. I've started noticing other things too, little moments that show how much has changed. Tessa comes over more often now, and we sit on my couch with mugs of tea, laughing about old memories from when we were 9, and the world felt simpler. She reminds me sometimes of how far I've come, how I used to text her after every family dinner, asking if I was overreacting, if the sigh really meant what I thought it meant. Now I don't need to ask. I know, and that knowing feels like freedom. I've even started dating again, slowly, carefully, but this time without the constant apology running in the back of my mind. The last guy I went out with asked me about my family, and I told him the truth, not the polished version I used to give, but the real one about the sighs and the calm that wasn't calm at all. He listened without pity, without trying to fix it, and for the first time I didn't feel like I had to make the story smaller to make it acceptable. It was just my story, and it was enough. There's still hard days. There are nights when I drive past the old house in Millbrook and the memories come flooding back. The smell of pot roast, the clink of silverware, the way the lamplight used to feel both warm and suffocating at the same time. I pull over sometimes and sit there in the car, letting myself feel it all without pushing it away. The grief of emotional invisibility isn't gone completely. It's part of me now, but it doesn't define me anymore. It's like an old scar that aches when the weather changes but doesn't stop me from living. I've learned to sit with it, to acknowledge it, to tell myself that feeling it doesn't make me weak or dramatic or too sensitive. It just makes me human. And being human, I've discovered, is something Mom never quite gave herself permission to be. Her own mother had taught her that feelings were things to be managed, not felt. That the house had to look perfect even when it wasn't. That love was best shown through quiet control rather than messy honesty. Knowing that doesn't excuse the 32 years, but it does soften the edges just enough that I can love her without losing myself in the process. I think about the emotional time bombs that were planted so early in my life. That phrase, if that's what you want, that always came with the sigh. The 5 perfect place settings that had to be set no matter what. The family photo on the wall where everyone smiled but I felt invisible. They detonated one by one as I started to speak up, and each time they did, something in me healed a little more. The last one hit hardest, realizing that the sighs weren't about me not being enough. They were about her not knowing how to hold anything bigger than polite. That realization didn't come in one big dramatic moment. It came in pieces, over weeks and months of small choices of saying no, of setting my own table, of smiling at my younger self in that photo without apology. And now looking back, I see how every layer built on the last, how the curiosity turned to discomfort, to outrage, to hope, to dread, and finally to this quiet release that feels like breathing for the first time in decades. I've started volunteering at a local community center on weekends, working with young girls who remind me so much of who I was at 7. Bright-eyed, full of drawings and dreams, already learning to make themselves smaller to keep the peace at home. I don't tell them my whole story right away. I just sit with them and listen, really listen, the way no one listened to me when I was their age. I tell them it's okay to feel big things. It's okay to take up space. It's okay to want more than fine. Some of them cry when I say it. Some of them nod like they've been waiting their whole short lives to hear those words. And every time one of them leaves with her head a little higher, I feel like I'm closing the circle. Like the little girl who once tried to fix her drawing to avoid the sigh is finally getting to help someone else avoid the same fate. Mom and I are still figuring it out. Some Sundays are easier than others. There are moments when she catches herself mid-sigh and stops, like she's trying to rewrite an old habit in real time. There are moments when I catch myself starting to apologize, and I stop too. We're both learning, both growing, both carrying the weight of generations of quiet expectations. It's not the fairy tale ending where everything becomes perfect and the sighs disappear forever. It's messier than that. It's real. And real feels so much better than perfect ever did. It's not the fairy tale ending where everything becomes perfect and the sighs disappear forever. It's messier than that. It's real. And real feels so much better than perfect ever did. Some Sundays, when I drive back to the old house in Millbrook, the same soft golden light still spills across the hardwood floors. The same lemon Polish scent still lingers in the air. And for a split second, I feel that old pull, the instinct to shrink, to make my voice smaller, to smooth everything over before it even starts. But then I remember the single plate on my own table, the candle I light every evening, the way I now say, I'm proud of this out loud without waiting for permission. And I walk in with my shoulders a little higher. Mom still sets 5 place settings, sometimes out of habit. She still lets out that tiny sigh when I talk about a new painting I finished, or a trip I'm planning alone. But now I just smile and say, yeah, Mom, it feels good. I don't rush to explain. I don't apologize for the excitement in my voice. I let the sigh sit there between us like an old guest who's finally overstayed its welcome. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, she catches herself. She'll stop mid-sigh, her hand pausing over the gravy boat, and she'll look at me with something softer in her eyes. I'm trying, Audra, she'll say quietly. I really am, and in those moments I see her clearly, the woman who was never taught how to hold big feelings, who learned from her own mother that calm meant control and silence meant safety. It doesn't erase the 32 years of quiet erasure. It doesn't make the loneliness I carried as a child magically disappear, but it lets me love her without losing myself in the process. I've started noticing how the old emotional time bombs have changed meaning now. That phrase she used for decades, if that's what you want, doesn't land like a stone anymore. It just sounds like an old habit she's slowly unlearning. The 5 perfect place settings she insisted on every single night. They used to symbolize how everything had to look right on the surface, even when someone was missing inside. Now, when I set my own table with 1 plate, it feels like the most honest act of love I've ever given myself. And that faded family photo on the living room wall, the one where everyone is smiling perfectly, but I remember feeling invisible in that exact moment, sits in my apartment now on a shelf near the window. I look at it every morning while I drink my coffee. The little girl in the middle isn't disappearing anymore. She's smiling back at me like she finally feels seen. These callbacks used to hurt. Now they feel like gentle reminders of how far the journey has come. They close the circle in a way that makes the whole story feel complete, not erased. There are so many small, beautiful details in my life now that I never thought I would have. I wake up on Saturday mornings and paint at the little desk by the window, sunlight warming my hands, the smell of fresh coffee mixing with the faint scent of acrylics. I don't worry if the colors are too bright or if the lines are too messy. I just paint, and when I finish, I hang it on the wall without asking anyone if it's good enough. I've taken weekend drives to the small lake just outside Millbrook, the one I used to pass on the way home from school. And I sit on the bench with my journal and write things I never dared to say out loud before. I've started cooking meals that are loud with spices, things Mom would have gently sighed at because they were a bit much. I eat them slowly, savoring every bite, letting myself enjoy something without making it smaller. I've reconnected with old friends I had quietly drifted from, the ones who used to ask me why I always apologized for existing. We laugh now about how long it took me to stop doing that. Tessa comes over almost every Friday night. We sit on the couch with takeout and talk for hours, not about how to fix things with Mom, but about how good it feels to finally take up space without guilt. She reminds me sometimes of the girl I was at 7, the one who tried so hard to fix her drawing to avoid the sigh. "Look at you now," she'll say, squeezing my hand. "You're not fixing anything anymore. You're just living." Even at work, things have shifted. I used to stay late, volunteering for extra projects I didn't really want, because saying no felt like inviting disappointment. Now, when my boss asks if I can take on something new, I pause, feel that old tightness in my chest, and then I answer honestly. "I'd love to, but I'm at capacity right now and I want to do my best on what I already have. No apology, no explanation that makes me smaller, and the world doesn't end." In fact, people respect me more. I've even started mentoring the younger accountants who come in looking a little too eager to please, the ones who remind me of myself at 27. I don't give them big speeches, I just listen when they share a win and I say, "That's really good. I'm proud of how hard you worked on that." And I watch their shoulders relax just a little, like someone finally gave them permission to feel proud without waiting for the sigh. There are still hard days. There are nights when the loneliness of those 32 years creeps back in and I sit on my couch with the candle burning low, feeling the weight of all the times I made myself invisible so the house could stay peaceful. I let myself feel it fully now. The grief of emotional invisibility, the deep, lonely ache of never quite being enough in a home that looked perfect from the outside. I don't push it away. I don't apologize to myself for feeling it. I just sit with it until it passes, like a cloud moving across the sky. And on the other side of it, I always find the same truth waiting for me. I am allowed to be here, fully here, loud in my own quiet way, messy, real, enough exactly as I am. I used to think love had to be silent, to be safe. Now I know real love has room for sighs and for voices, for the messy and the loud and the real. It has room for me exactly as I am, with all my feelings and all my dreams and all the space I need to take up. It has room for Mom too, even with her old habits, because I've learned I can love her without disappearing. And that feels like the biggest victory of all. So tell me, what's one small thing your calm parent did that quietly broke you over the years? The sigh that wasn't loud enough for anyone else to notice. The polite half-smile that somehow made your words win feel small. The way they kept everything looking peaceful while you were slowly fading inside. I read every single comment. This space is for all of us who grew up in houses that looked perfect from the outside, but left us carrying something heavy inside. You're not alone in this. None of us are. And if you're sitting there right now feeling that familiar tightness in your chest, just know that it's okay to finally take up space. It's okay to stop shrinking. It's okay to set your own table with one plate and call it home. I'm still here, still growing, still learning to speak to a voice that doesn't apologize for existing. And if my story helps even one person feel a little less invisible, then every one of those quiet sighs was worth it. Because they led me here, to this place where I finally feel seen, not just by others, but by myself. Thank you for listening to all of this. It means more than you know.